Sì. Invito Leon Schmidt, il delegato ENA per l'Olanda, ad avvicinarsi perché il primo intervento programmato è il suo. Grazie. Invito gli ospiti a sedersi che ricominciamo con i lavori.
Down? All over down? Okay. This. Yeah, okay.
Prima di lasciare la parola a Leon Schmidt vorrei salutare alcuni ospiti che ci hanno raggiunto, cominciando dal Cavaliere Alfredo Diana, già Ministro dell'Agricoltura, poi il dottor Lorenzo Bazzana, responsabile nazionale del florovivaismo per Coldiretti, e poi il dottore Vinci, che è il direttore di Confindustria Catania, il dottor Giuseppe Marano, che è il direttore dell'Osservatorio Fitopatologico per le malattie delle piante e del cereale, e il dottor Rosario Danna, dirigente dell'assessorato all'agricoltura. Adesso lascio la parola a Leon Schmidt, il delegato ENA per l'Olanda, per il suo intervento. Grazie.
Thank you, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank our friends from Italy and especially the people from Sicily to host us here. It's a great place to be here. Thank you very much. INA believes that promotion is an important issue, so we have something to say about how promotion was organized in the past in Europe, and how INA believes they can make most out of promotional activities by joining forces with the various countries. I had prepared a sheet with some market figures, but I will skip it because Mr. Pages from Spain has already spoken about that, and the figures were right. In the past, in the Netherlands, maybe you've heard of a company called Plant Publicity Holland. They have existed for 60 years and organized promotional activities all throughout the European Union in over 20 countries. The activities were paid with levy money from the growers and the trade people, and with help from the monies from the European Union, the money was doubled. Most of the activities were done in the most important market, the European Union, where around 60% of the production value stays. Further on, there were activities organized in the US, Russia, and Asia. Cooperation was done in the past a lot with organizations from Germany, BDB, the English organization, HTA, French organizations, and also the international AIPH. Activities on promotion have mostly been organized in terms of organizing PR, which is a very effective way of reaching the large public, point of sale activities at retailers, and organizing exhibitions with various companies in different countries, also exploring new markets. There were two markets basically defined: the consumer market, which is actually roughly 60% of the total market of all the production value. I say roughly. There were a few campaigns which, through PR and the campaign called Plant of the Month and Color Your Life, storytelling was done. And storytelling means tell the story behind the plant. So show the plant, it's beautiful, it has beautiful value, but also where was it produced, what can it do with you, how does it make you happy? That's the development in promotion. It was a pull and push strategy that was done over a period of 60 years, and it was basically focusing a lot on the emotion of the people. Nowadays, social media is very actual, so in the last few years there was a large increase in using social media, using a lot less money to organize promotion and reaching a large public. There was a second market which is also very important. It's the amenity market, the communities. Some of you have already spoken about the importance of the community market around Europe and around the world, and maybe you know the Green City formula. The Green City formula is a platform where growers, trade people and communities come together with scientists, in order to tell the story about what plants can do for people. And it's backed up with more and more scientific information. For example, plants can do a lot with temperature. In large cities, the plants will help reduce the temperature. It gives a cooler climate. The real estate value of housing is improved by using planting in the plants. And there are many, many reasons to why to influence the political agenda and why to talk with politicians about the beautiful products that are produced around Europe. In Holland, however, after 60 years of collective promotion and people paying for the activities with joint organizations, there has been an end since last year. So we had to look for new initiatives to organize throughout the business how to work with promotion. We had to ask the companies if they were willing to pay and if they were willing to pay for activities around the world. Most of them said yes, because they think it's very important to organize joint promotion. An initiative called iBulb, which is a small example I will mention, is focused on the bulb industry. There is a budget in the past of over 4 million euros, which was paid for promotion, technical research and market access, which has now, on a voluntary basis, been put together at a level of over 2 million euros. The reason why I'm saying this is that trade people are really willing to pay it, and growers are really willing to pay it for promotion as long as you do it joint and you have a good program. Using a media filer, which is social media and internet, enables us to reach over 1,000 journalists around Europe with messages about the importance of plants, of bulbs, and how they affect the lives of people. Now, very shortly, we also started a promotional initiative for the nursery industry called iVerde. And iVerde is a joint activity between the growers, the landscapers, and the trade people in the Netherlands. It's a chain approach, and we only have one objective. Together we are strong, and we want to stimulate the public value of nursery stock, the public value at consumer level and also at amenity level. So there is a large lobby organization working, talking to the people that are working with the politicians, enabling to influence their agenda. It's a chain approach, which means working together, bottom up. Two markets, amenity market and consumer market, and what we want to do is to continue existing networks and knowledge. There has been a period of 60 years in which knowledge and networks have been built up, and we don't want to lose it. So we are going to open it up for all the people here if they want to work together, especially when we can do it from INA organization. The first activities that will start this year are the organization of a perennial day, where we are going to tell the public a lot about perennials, and the election of local communities in 2014. We want the politicians to be aware of the importance of green, which roughly means that we are going to bomb them with messages about the importance of plants and how they affect health, how they affect lifestyle, etc., etc. What can INA in promotion do? I believe that bottom-up to market is very important. The growers have all the knowledge about the plants. They know which plants to plant at which place, and they can inform the people that work with it the best. We have to influence communities and policymakers. We share and expand our knowledge, and there is a general purpose: make market, maintain market, and enlarge new markets. There could also be a crossover with new industries, I believe. If we work together with real estate, we work together with the health industry, we can make very interesting crossovers in order to reach people within new thoughts. Plus, there is in Europe an amount of money which is collected in Brussels every year, and we can use it. As nurserymen, as tradesmen, we have the possibility to use this money and co-finance our activity. If we do not use it, other sectors will use it. So we believe it's very important. Second, I think that ENA should also look with the countries and the people in each country at possible new markets. When we look at new markets, for example in Holland, we see the health industry in hospitals. There has been a lot of research nowadays about people who are in a hospital. When they look at plants, they recover more quickly than when they look at a brick wall, for example. These studies have been done all around the world, and it enables us to find a new market and talk, for example, to management of hospitals, talk to insurance people. Schoolyards, children, a very important market. Children need to play outside, play in a green environment, is healthy for them, they stay fit, they become better educated. There's many reasons why we should see schoolyards and children as a new market. Second, I believe, is city marketing. City marketing means more and more people are living in cities, and we should focus on the city. In the future, more than half of the people are going to live in cities. And second, one of the most rising markets is the internet. When I look at the plant sales through internet, it's rising. Finally, I believe that from an ENA perspective, a joint European program could be built. For example, we could exchange knowledge and start a tree network. We could use our knowledge that we have in the various countries to connect and create a uniform message to either reach the public, reach the communities, and hook onto a theme which is called People, Planet and Profit. We have the ultimate product to reach these markets and to deal with. And I also believe that efficient communication nowadays can really lower the cost using PR and all our activities. Why should we cooperate in promotion, and why should we do promotion? Some people don't believe in promotion, we do. I believe that there's a competitiveness with other markets. A consumer and a person has €1 and they can spend it on media and they can spend it on traveling. We want them to spend their euros to our plants because we want to sell plants. I believe it's also important because there's a trend in healthy cities. Over 50% of the world population lives in cities, so that's a very important place. Then again, there's also the rise of corporate social responsibility. More and more people and companies have to have their carbon footprint okay. They want to do something back for society. Again, we have the ultimate product to work with this. In short, I would like to thank you for my reviews on promotion and the chances this will offer for our ENA corporation and all the people sitting on the table here. Thank you very much.
Ringraziamo Leon Smet per il suo intervento. Adesso è la volta di Renzo Spagnesi, vicepresidente dell'ANVE, che nel corso della sua relazione affronterà anche una case history e in particolare il sostegno finanziario dell'ACE all'innovazione d'impresa. Prego.
Sì, buongiorno a tutti. Lasciatemi ringraziare Elena che ha dato via a questa tavola di lavoro molto importante e sono molto lieto di poter partecipare, di poter intervenire a questo incontro. Io, come è stato detto, ricopro la carica di vicepresidente all'interno dell'ANVE e lavoro a un vivaio di Pistoia, al vivaio Santo Bruschi, ormai da molti anni. Stamani abbiamo sentito molte relazioni e molte di queste si sono dilungate sulla situazione, sulla congiuntura negativa che a livello non solo nazionale ma europeo stiamo vivendo e crisi di cui risente anche il nostro settore. Io voglio cogliere questa occasione per sottolineare che anche in periodi di crisi si può crescere, anche in periodi di crisi si possono cogliere degli aspetti positivi che ci possono aiutare ad andare avanti. Mi fa piacere ricordare, ne parlavo ieri sera, che in Cina crisi viene espressa con un ideogramma, come molti di voi saprete, che sono 2 ideogrammi che contengono il significato di problematica ma anche di opportunità. Ecco, nella crisi dobbiamo vedere anche l'opportunità, perché è pur vero che le imprese vivaistiche anche in questo periodo stanno investendo. Basta guardarsi intorno in questa location meravigliosa e vedere come un nostro collega continua in un'opera di investimento e di grande capacità di presentazione della propria attività. Il nostro settore ha due capisaldi molto importanti, che sono la tradizione e l'innovazione. Sulla tradizione abbiamo sempre fatto molto, siamo stati capaci di portare avanti non solo il germoplasma autoctono, ma anche gli antichi mestieri, anche le antiche attività. Sull'innovazione invece abbiamo sicuramente marcato il passo più spesso. Ecco che io nel mio intervento cercherò di illustrarvi 3 iniziative innovative che a livello di Vivaio Sandro Bruschi stiamo portando avanti. 2 innovazioni sono innovazioni per così dire di processo, mentre la terza, mi piace chiamarla così, innovazione, pur trattandosi semplicemente di un modo di operare diverso, innovativo, di un comportamento innovativo. Quali sono le 2 innovazioni che stiamo portando avanti all'interno della nostra attività? Una riguarda la sperimentazione di un nuovo terriccio. Voi sapete che noi utilizziamo nei terricci le pitmos e la torba, e che questo costituisce un grosso problema a livello europeo, perché vuol dire contribuire a depauperare una risorsa irriproducibile come è la torba. Ecco, noi abbiamo avviato una sperimentazione, alla fine della quale avrà interessato 60.000 piante, per utilizzare all'interno del terriccio, in sostituzione in toto e in parte della torba, la trasformazione e la maturazione degli scarti della produzione olearia. La produzione olearia, i frantoi, scartano dopo 2 processi lavorativi un prodotto umido, in gran parte costituito dalla sanza, ma non solo, anche da reflui. Ecco, noi abbiamo preso questo prodotto e attraverso un processo di trasformazione, coadiuvati dal CNR e dalla Facoltà di Agraria dell'Università di Perugia, abbiamo composto 8 tesi, 8 diverse miscele che stiamo sperimentando nei nostri vasi. Ecco, siamo alla seconda campagna agraria e stiamo riscontrando che in particolare una di queste composizioni non solo non impedisce un corretto sviluppo della pianta, ma anzi in alcuni casi interviene per inibire il propagarsi di determinate patologie fitosanitarie. Quindi un doppio contributo all'ambiente. Da un lato riutilizziamo uno scarto, che i frantoi hanno grossi problemi a smaltire, soprattutto nella sua componente liquida, e dall'altro riduciamo, o l'obiettivo è quello, di ridurre l'uso dei fitofarmaci, proprio perché grazie a questo prodotto che sembra avere queste proprietà. Questo progetto l'abbiamo presentato alla Comunità Europea e ha avuto un finanziamento, quindi portiamo avanti questa sperimentazione grazie anche al contributo che abbiamo ottenuto. E questo ci è sembrato un segnale molto incoraggiante per quanto riguarda l'attività di innovazione con cui noi vogliamo sostenere la nostra produzione. Per questo abbiamo avviato di recente un altro processo innovativo, sempre di prodotto, il secondo a cui alludevo, è quello di sperimentare un vaso biodegradabile. Stiamo mettendo a punto un materiale, anche questo da riuso di scarti della lavorazione industriale, e grazie alla consulenza dell'Università di Ingegneria Chimica di Pisa siamo riusciti a elaborare, a comporre un contenitore che esternamente sembra, perché la sperimentazione è in corso, devo usare la forma condizionale, sembra comportarsi come gli altri vasi, gli altri contenitori di plastica, mentre quando si trova in assenza di ossigeno e di luce si decompone in maniera molto accelerata e rilascia sostanze che sono di nutrimento alla pianta. Quindi capite, anche qui l'intento è quello di essere più friendly nei confronti dell'ambiente, proprio perché risolviamo il problema dello smaltimento enorme dei contenitori di plastica, che, come dire, è un problema per tutti i vivai, e al tempo stesso cerchiamo di dare un aiuto alla pianta per fargli superare lo stress dal reimpianto. Anche questo progetto l'abbiamo presentato in sede comunitaria e abbiamo avuto un importante finanziamento per procedere nella nostra attività. Questi due progetti li abbiamo portati avanti all'interno di una logica di filiera e vengo alla terza innovazione con cui concludo rapidamente il mio intervento. Li abbiamo presentati sviluppando una politica di rete, una politica di filiera. Ecco, io credo che questo terzo aspetto, questo modo di comportarci diverso rispetto a un recente passato, possa essere un elemento di novità da sottolineare fortemente, perché io credo che dalla crisi si riesca a uscire in maniera positiva se cominciamo veramente a praticare un terreno di collaborazione, di integrazione tra le imprese. Io credo che questi progetti che noi abbiamo avviato siano importanti per il prodotto innovativo che noi speriamo ci diano, ma sono ancora più importanti per il processo di lavorare insieme, di integrazione, di comportamento unito che cerchiamo di avviare in una realtà come quella pistoiese, che molti di voi conoscono per avere un carattere fortemente individualista. C'è stato un periodo, per così dire, pionieristico, per cui a buon diritto forse, ma certo non si poteva fare diversamente, le imprese hanno lavorato molto al loro interno, molto nel chiuso delle loro mura. Ecco, io credo che la fase congiunturale che stiamo vivendo ci deve invitare a questo, a aprire le nostre porte, a confrontarci come stamattina facciamo a questo tavolo e ad avviare delle forme di collaborazione molto forti tra le imprese, per creare delle centrali d'acquisto, per creare dei processi commerciali e produttivi integrati, ma soprattutto per trovare il modo di innovare, di crescere, superando anche quei limiti che ci sono nel nostro settore, che anche stamattina venivano sottolineati. Io mi fermavo un attimo a vedere i dati che sono stati forniti sull'Europa. Pensate, 30.000 vivai, 127.000 ettari, 125.000 addetti, vuol dire ogni impresa 4 ettari, 4 addetti, quindi dimensioni ridotte, ridottissime, che certo da sole non si potrebbero permettere investimenti in immagine o in strutture o in innovazione. Mettendosi insieme io credo che si possa riuscire a superare queste ristrettezze e si possa dare un significato virtuoso anche alla crisi, perché può diventare l'occasione per migliorare la nostra efficienza, elevare il controllo di qualità, avere un controllo di gestione maggiore, riuscire tutti insieme a crescere pure in condizioni congiunturali così avverse. Grazie.
Grazie. Chiamo a intervenire adesso David Brown, che è il General Secretary dell'ENA, e ci affronterà una questione di grandissima importanza, cioè quella relativa alla legge fitosanitaria che è in discussione adesso negli organismi comunitari. Grazie.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Phytosanitary problems have been mentioned in many of the speeches already this morning. I'm just going to spend a little bit of time talking with you about the package of measures that the European Commission has just published, aimed at simplifying regulations and directives in the food chain. And I use the food chain deliberately because that is what the European Commission calls these proposals. But because of legal definitions, ornamental horticulture falls into the food chain. So this applies to all of us as well. Just going to spend a little bit of time talking about the current regime, the need for change, the timescale for change, and then what the proposed regulation might look like. I should also mention that within the package of regulations, there is a further regulation, which I'm not going to talk about this morning, about plant reproductive material. That could have significant implications for our businesses as well, and INA will be working closely on that regulation on your behalf. So the current regime. Just to remind you, it was harmonised in 1993 to facilitate trade in the single market. It's based on 3 key planks. Common rules for imports from outside the European Union, which were accompanied by phytosanitary certificates. Once those plants arrived within the EU, phytosanitary certificates were replaced with plant passports, and that's for movements within and between member states. But plant passports only apply to those plants with certain specific risks that are laid down in the law. Passports are issued by the authorised nurseries. Second plank was action against outbreaks. National emergency action is allowed against new pests and diseases, but those measures can be amended or rescinded by the EU, and as we heard earlier, can take a long time to come into effect. Some regionalisation is allowed within the Union through the use of protected zones. So why is the Commission proposing these changes? It's 15 years since the single market came into being, and we've seen significant changes in trade, both within the EU and from outside the EU over that time. Enlargement of the Union has seen many more member states join. Politicians say that they want to see better regulation and not more. They've decided to bring plant health and animal health together in this package. I question whether that will make for better regulation or not. But that is something we as an industry must work on over time. We've seen new systems developed by our scientists who can now better evaluate pests and diseases. We've also seen a change of personnel in the Commission, and they have brought a fresh impetus to the whole area of plant health, but also food safety, which is what they've lumped plant health into. And of course, I don't need to tell an audience like this of some of the high-profile problems we've seen in recent years. Pinewood nematode, maize rootworm, sudden oak death, or Phytophthora ramorum, as I'm sure you'll know it better, the red palm weevil, Tuta absoluta, it's devastated the tomato industry, and the one that's not on there but is causing a huge amount of attention and money in the United Kingdom at present is ash dieback, or Callada fraxinia. So what is our timescale for change? As I said, the Commission have launched the package. It was launched on the 6th of May. We've already seen a number of meetings and a first read-through under the Irish presidency. President Laponi mentioned earlier on that he had been to one of those meetings. Although I've got a question mark against the Lithuanian presidency, it now does seem clear over the last couple of years that they will be making this a priority. There are complications because this will be a co-decision between the Council of Ministers and the European Parliament. And that brings a complication because, of course, there are European Parliament elections next year. In a meeting with the Director of the Food and Veterinary Office last week, he told me that he was still confident that they would be able to negotiate the package before the European Parliament elections, although I have to say I don't share his confidence. If it does go through, we could see new legislation by 2016. If not, if it has to wait until after the elections, we will see the new regulations come into force in 2018. However, that might seem a long time away. Now is the time that we need to be working on this. And improvements to the current system do not need to wait, in our opinion, for the new regulation. We're seeing some better coordination in science, although I suspect it's not enough. We're seeing better coordination between national inspectorates for plant health, and better training. But again, it's quite limited and we need to speed up what is happening there. Work is ongoing between the plant health authorities, both national and at Commission level, with exporting countries, countries that send into Europe, where non-compliant trades and problems have been identified. I understand that trials are about to be started on introducing what's called the traces system to electronically log and track imports of plants into the European Union. Traces is currently used for animals and has been used for a number of years. There is quite a lot of development work going on to see whether that system can be moved from animals into plants. And of course, speeding up decision making. We've heard on numerous occasions this morning how long it can take to get some decisions passed through the political system. There is no excuse for that. We need to be pressing our politicians to speed up their decision making. So, the proposed regulation, the one that was published on the 6th of May, what does it look like? It's set out in a number of chapters, the first one relating to pests. And when they say pests, they also include diseases and other things that are harmful to plants. So it's not just what some of us think of as pests, as in insects. We start with quarantine pests, and the regulation states that quarantine pests must not be introduced into or moved within the European Union. The Commission will draw up a list of quarantine pests, and on top of that, or as part of that, will draw up a list of priority pests, which will be no more than 10% of the total list. Those priority pests will be subject to even tighter legislation. So what happens? Well, if you know or if you think you've got a quarantine pest, you must tell your plant health authority. The member state will then tell the European Commission, and the European Commission will notify the other member states. But in the country of notification, the authorities must notify anybody who might be affected. So if it is a pest of a certain plant, all nurseries who might be affected by that pest will need to be notified by the plant health authorities. Those where it has actually been found, nurseries will be obliged to notify the people they have bought from if it has come in on plants. But if plants have moved out, they will also be obliged to notify their customers. And if the plant health authority says so, you must arrange a product recall. That could end up being very expensive. Where a finding has been established, the authority will have to bring in a restricted area and then a buffer zone around that area, which will have to be surveyed before restrictions can be lifted. Similar rules will also be laid down for protected zones. I mentioned quality pests. Quality pests used to be included under the marketing regulations. In future, they will come under the plant health regulations. These are ones that are not deemed to be quarantine pests, but are felt that they could have such an economic significance that they should not be allowed to be moved within Europe. Again, it's funny how often this turns up in the legislation. The European Commission will draw up a list of quality pests and the plants that they are associated with. As far as plants and plant products and other material is concerned, again, the proposal requires the Commission to bring in legislation to list plants, products and other material. And other material includes growing media. And there will be a list of those products where they're subject to restrictions from third countries where there's thought to be an unacceptable plant health risk. Clearly, with growing media in there, this could have significant implications for trade, particularly in root ball material. As far as new and emerging trades is concerned, this is a very new addition to what has gone before. The European Union has in the past allowed trade to take place, and then if there's a problem, act then. The proposed regulation turns that onto its head. It will allow the European Commission to bring in restrictions or even prohibitions on trades for up to 2 years, with the possibility of an extension for a further 2 years, whilst risk assessments are carried out. Quite how that will work in practice is still open to negotiation, but clearly everybody with an interest in imports and exports needs to be aware of that, needs to be talking with their politicians, talking with their trade associations, both nationally and through ENA, to make sure that we are getting the right conditions to allow trade to continue whilst not damaging the plant health of Europe. As far as certification is concerned, as is now, plants coming into the European Union will have to have a phytosanitary certificate. The regulation lays down that those will then be transferred for plant passports, and also plant passports will be required for movements within the Union. As you all know, the passport is an official certificate, and again, the Commission will be drawing up a list of plants and plant products that require a plant passport. However, it's quite clear from the way the proposal is drafted that the Commission intend to have plant passports on all plants for planting. That is a significant extension from what currently happens, and that means many more businesses will have to register to issue plant passports. The content and the format and the style of the passport will be laid down in law, and I can see some very interesting negotiations going on between different countries. One of the suggestions in the regulation is that the passport must contain the EU logo. As you'll gather from my accent, I'm from the United Kingdom, and our Prime Minister has already, in the run-up to his next election, announced that there will be a referendum on the future membership of the United Kingdom in the European Union. So what he will be thinking of a EU label, EU logo on a UK plant passport, I'm not sure. Passports will be issued by professional operators being people, or they can ask their authority to issue them. But if you are, as a nursery, if you are authorised to issue passports, you will have to have monitoring and recording in place. You will have to have training plans for your staff so that they are competent to recognise plant health problems. And if you're trading plants, one early success for ENA, in an early draft, the use of replacement plant passports would have been forbidden. The latest draft regulation, directly as a request from ENA, will allow for the use of replacement plant passports, provided the plants can still be traced. On imports and exports, the proposal makes it clear that the Commission wants to see imports and exports of plants and plant products to meet similar standards as those plants that are grown and traded in the European Union. The regulation says that unless there's been a bilateral trade agreement between the parties, the standards contained in the regulations will apply to imports and exports. We know from the announcements over the last couple of weeks that their negotiations are to start on a bilateral trade agreement between the United States and the European Union. I think that they will be very interesting and very difficult negotiations before we get a bilateral agreement, particularly in the area of plants. Please bear in mind that we have in the UK a phrase called tit for tat, and there will be a lot of tit for tat arguments in those negotiations. The USA is because this covers the whole of agriculture, the USA is very keen to send GM food crops to Europe. Europe is less keen to receive them. trade in plants we will need to be making our case very strongly to make sure we get the right situation for trade in plants with America. Several people mentioned earlier on the current problems. Yes, now is the time to be starting addressing them. Mr. Faro in particular was talking about them in his speech. As far as financing is concerned, some aspects will be financed between the European Union and the Member States. However, it's quite clear that they will be looking for the industry, the nurseries and traders to play their part in financing the regulation. From the control regulation, it looks likely that businesses with fewer than 10 people and a turnover of less than 2 million euros will be exempt from fees. So whether we will see a number of new businesses springing up as existing businesses divide, time will tell. Also in the financial regulation is suggestion that compensation will be payable to growers for destroyed stock. The details of that will take some very careful negotiations as well. Just on a couple of other issues, Member States will have to draw up contingency plans to deal with outbreaks of priority pests. If contingency plans are going to be meaningful, they will need to involve nurseries and the cooperation of nurseries. And Member States will have to legislate for penalties, for fines, for those who breach the regulations. That is something else that will take careful negotiation. Will we want to see a phased approach, so if somebody has a minor breach, they just get a slap on the wrist or have their authority to issue passports withdrawn for a certain time, or do you immediately go into fines? These are all things that are up for negotiation. In conclusion, whether it be 2016 or 2018, it might seem a long way away, but it's not. The detailed negotiations are just starting now. We need to be in a position to influence those. We need to be working with the Commission. We need to be working with the European Parliament. We need to be working with our national governments to make sure that we can help trade in clean plants and not stop trade altogether. Thank you for your attention. If there are any questions, I'll be around over the breaks and I'll be happy to take any then. Thank you.
Grazie, adesso è il turno di Michael Jury, CEO dell'American Nursery and Landscape Association. Prego.
Good morning and thank you. I was thinking about Leon's comments this morning about the research that's been done about the plants affecting our health. It also is known that plants improve our learning environment, so it's wonderful to be in this arboretum and be used to have some critical thinking about the future of our industry. This is so important to be in this context. I want to say thank you also to our hosts, to the ENA and to the Agriculture Ministry and to the team with ENA for making us feel so welcome and appreciate the opportunity to be here to be with you. This is the first time that many of us have ever met, and so I thought I'd take a few moments to talk a little bit about our organizations and then as well as what's going on in the United States in terms of our industry. In fact, it's been very interesting the last day speaking with each other on tour buses and our tours around the various nurseries here in Sicily that there are not many things that are different. In fact, there's a lot of commonalities between our countries. We may use different words, but the issues are in fact the same. And this is a great, an important opportunity for us to figure out how can we work together, but also learn from each other to improve the quality of our industry in our various countries. Quickly, just a little overview of our industry. Much has been commented by others that there's not great statistics available. The U.S. Department of Agriculture many years ago cut back on its research, and so they basically take a summary or they make an assumption or judgment based on the top 15 producing states in the U.S. about what the total value of the industry is. Currently, in the last survey, we're valuing the total industry, and this is not just nursery stock, but also olive floriculture and the retail value at about $15 billion. And this is great news for us. Much like the rest of the world, we had a major economic downturn, the great global recession 5 years ago, and we're slowly climbing back. So over the years, hundreds of millions of dollars are adding, and we're back to returning, not quite to normal, but we're getting close to the point that we have some confidence in the economy in the United States, and that we're seeing now the value of the industry grow. This is bringing confidence, of course, into our members, into the growers and the retailers, and that they can start investing in inventory, investing in research that they've stopped doing for many years. In fact, we just learned recently in that hearing from the home building industry and the construction industry, there's now a lack of enough plants. Like we have a shortage of plants in some areas of the country because we cut back on production during the recession time, and now we're having to catch up. So this is a good sign for us, and I think a good sign for the world as well. We export very little. Most of the things that, in terms of our industry, stays within the confines of the 50 states and the territories of the United States. In fact, most of our exporting really is just to our partner in the north, to Canada. So most of our concerns or interests are really within as I said, the confines of our country. In fact, even our importing, which is about $1 billion in importing each year, most of that is being done imported strictly for production and is done by countries that are headquartered in the United States, but they do their early production overseas in Central America, for example, then import it in and then to finish production within the States. There's not a lot of import that's happening from around the world in terms of plants for consumers, and we know why that is, and we've talked about this already several times, even the EU's effort here about maintaining control over the health of our plants. Industry is quite large. There are approximately 500,000 people employed throughout the entire industry, and that is from the breeding side through production and all aspects of the industry. We don't have it, fortunately can't separate out how many are people in production alone, but it's a very large industry, and this is why it's important to our country, other than just providing beauty and health, but certainly the economic impact of employing 500,000 people in an industry is a powerful message when we speak to our legislators and our regulators, whether it's in Washington, D.C., our capital, or the capitals of the 50 states and territories that make up the country. Growing operations are nearly 8,400, and this is quite down, this in terms of nursery, and then 1,200 in all of floriculture. This is down by hundreds, if not thousands, of companies over the years that have gone out of business because of the recession and just not returned to their industry. I started, if you back on the first slide, I was introduced with the American Nursery and Landscape Association. There's also one other national organization in the United States that's called OFA. And the reason I'm mentioning this is important because the two organizations are merging this year, and this is a result of what's happening in our own industry. There's been consolidation among operations, and the industry associations that serve the industry are also consolidating to save money, to be more efficient with our time and our money. So we're moving into one organization, and so next year, I think the next time that we have this opportunity for a roundtable, we will be here under a different name, but basically the same organization is doing the same things we're trying to do to support the industry. And what's really important about this, and it's been mentioned by a few other speakers today, is connecting the entire supply chain. This is in fact our most critical issue, is connecting the breeders to the growers to the retailers, because ultimately we can grow quality plants, but if we cannot sell them, the production is not necessary, obviously. So we have a big focus now on improving the quality of the end of the supply chain, which is the retail side. And so the merging of these organizations are really going to put great emphasis and effort into ensuring that we are one industry, in fact, that we're working together, we're not working independently for our own good. The association, once it is organized by next year, and in fact currently now offers the largest trade fair expo in North America for all of horticulture. And if you've been to the IPM Essen show in Essen, Germany, our event is very much like that. It includes all aspects of the industry that, from production, growing, retail, florists, garden centers, etc. So I invite you, if you have interest in or have attended IPM and have found interest in that event, to attend our event in July, which is in the Central States every year. More than just working on technical issues that we've been talking about today in terms of plant health, but also we are very involved in professional development, helping people be better business managers, running their businesses more efficiently. We can grow a quality plant, but you need to know how to manage your business and know how to sell it. And so there's a lot of effort going into that. We also have our own research entity, the Horticulture Research Institute. So we partner with universities and government to produce our own research, and research paid for by industry that's important, that we know that is necessary to have effective and quality plants. And lastly, which I'll talk about in just a moment, is our main efforts. One of our key things that we do as an organization is to impact regulations and legislation in the country, primarily at the national level, but also somewhat at the state levels as well. So getting into some of our industry issues, that was a quick overview of who we are. You know, one thing that's not been talked about yet, and is not only is the economy is improving, but one of the main concerns we have is going forward is that the demographics are shifting within our country, and that is that the cohorts or the generations of people are changing. And so the generation of people that were born around 1987, which we call the Y generation, the letter Y generation, is much smaller than any, let me back up for a moment. The generation that I am with, Generation X, people born in the mid-60s and later, are much smaller than our parents' generation. And then the next generation that's coming, Generation Y, which is born in the mid-80s, they're not yet at the age where they will be buying homes, buying plants, and not yet gardening. And in fact, we don't know they'll have any interest in gardening at all. We don't know, in fact, necessarily that they'll have any interest in buying large homes, which has been the trend in the United States for many years. In fact, what we think they're going to do is move into smaller homes, and in fact be more urban environments instead of living in the suburban areas. So what does this mean for us? Well, this means that perhaps there aren't going to be enough gardeners as we've had over the hundreds of years that we were used to. That we're not going to have large homes and large yards to put our trees and our shrubs and our turf. And so there's so much demand or distraction, if you will, I guess, for dollars, that we're concerned that whether or not people are going to have any interest in buying plants and flowers. And they're not yet expressing that interest. Of course, they're not old enough yet. They're just now getting this generation into the mid-20s. They're not old enough yet to buy homes. They haven't really established a career yet. But once they get into their 30s, we're crossing our fingers and hoping that they, in fact, will have interest in our industry, like the other generations. Anticipating that may not be the case, we're working aggressively right now to help businesses understand how to survive that generation until the next generation comes along, or at least until this generation gets old enough that they'll be interested and have the dollars to consume our products and services. Lastly, there's also our concern in terms of just construction in general, and we're hoping that residential construction returns to the pace that it was back in the 80s and the 90s. It is looking much better now, but as you know, our industry is so tied to housing and to commercial construction that if it doesn't return, that's still another gap in that we have to recover and dig ourselves out of that hole. So those are some looming concerns. There's things that are, of course, ongoing that's been mentioned already this morning, and that's just phytosanitary standards. We are involved in all the international programs, but one of the next step for us, and I think very much is mentioned here in the EU, is that we can have federal standards, but we have 50 states and territories that also must subscribe to it, or at least even if they're required by law to adhere to that, they have to modify their own regulations. So as an organization, as an industry, we're constantly struggling to try to harmonize the international or national standards for plant safety with the various states. In fact, many of you talked about exporting plants to various countries. Within our own country, you cannot export plants from one state to another many times. That even within the confines of our own border, you cannot ship trees or plants from one side of the country to the other side of the country because of concern for plant health. So that is an ongoing struggle to try to figure out how do we facilitate, how do we ensure better quality and health of plants, as well as I said, harmonize the regulations so that within the country itself, we can do trade internally so that we can expand the markets for various growers. I guess really the slide is next one really talks about that, just the internal regulations and the environment. We thankfully have a very good working environment, a working relationship with the U.S. Department of Agriculture and many of the states' Department of Agriculture. So this is a difficult process, of course, but thankfully with a good relationship, they trust our organization, they trust our industry to do the right thing, they understand the value of the industry and what we bring to the country, and so they're willing to work with us. Really, the biggest problem, it's not the regulators, it's the legislators, and the information, trying to inform them and help them understand the challenges of our industry, because they're not in our industry, they don't understand our language and our needs, and so trying to inform them and move them to make legislation the way that we need it to be is really the biggest challenge. Thankfully, though, recently we're working on a couple of bills. There's two bills being debated in our U.S. Congress right now. One is on immigration, and I've spoken with several of you about the same issues of just trying to find labor to supply our industry. And this is a growing and increasing challenge every single year. We're trying to find a long-term solution that will allow for visitors to come in with temporary worker permits and to work in our industry and even agriculture itself. In fact, I read this morning about a major producer of tomatoes in the U.S. that is going to stop producing tomatoes because they don't have enough labor in order to cultivate the crop or harvest the crop. So this is a major problem, and we're trying to explain this to legislators that they think they bring emotion into it and they forget about the economics, that we need people, in fact, to work in our greenhouses, work in our nurseries, and in fact, work on our farms as well. We're also working on a major, what we call the Farm Bill, which is a 5-year funding program that provides resources not just for nutrition, providing food to people in the country that need assistance with buying food, but in our case is really funding for research and market development. At this point, because of our great relationship, we've been able to secure funding for the future, so we'll have hundreds of millions of dollars, which is very important, as you know, to have government funding research and other initiatives that we cannot on our own do as an industry. I quickly mentioned immigration already, and just one more comment on that, one of the goals is to allow for more workers to come into the country. Right now it's capped. We're hoping that finally when the immigration bill is finalized that will allow for people to enter the country and be able to work and be able to move around the country as well and not be tied to one location, which is currently how many visas are handled. It's almost sort of a joke, in fact, that there are about 11 million people in the United States that are there improperly. Either they've extended their visas or perhaps they have entered the country illegally, and legislators say, well, just make them go home. Yeah, well, I don't know how you make 11 million people go home. That's not a reality. And so there are jobs for them in our country, and now we're trying to figure out a way, how do we make them get jobs in a legal manner. So that's basically a quick overview of our country and our association, what's going on, our major initiatives right now. It sounds very familiar, and so this has been a very interesting and rewarding experience to be here with you, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Grazie. Adesso è il turno di Rita Wedenburg della Canadian Nursery Landscape Association. Prego.
Thank you. I feel very privileged to be making this presentation to such a distinguished group of Nursery Association executives on behalf of Canada's wholesale nursery growers, and especially this first ever worldwide roundtable to discuss issues of concern to our colleagues around the world. Okay, good. So thank you very much for this opportunity. So I'm not here to talk about Canada and what a great country it is, because that would take me well past my allotted time. But understanding a little bit about our demographics is important to understand the challenges faced by our growers. Canada is a vast and diverse country, and these few facts and figures are intended to bring some context to the discussion. This slide is simply to add some perspective to Canada's statistics. While we do boast a wealth of land and resources, however, it is important to know that our populations are focused in a few relatively small geographic regions, and congestion can be as much an issue for Canadians as it is for many European centres. In many respects, Canada's geography and demographics have shaped our industry association structure. Each of Canada's provinces has their own trade association. To bring to the table and to the government the necessary strength of numbers, each provincial association is comprised of the various sectors of industry, including landscape and maintenance contractors, retail garden centres, wholesale nursery growers, and other related trades. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. Not only does this structure bring strength of numbers, but a good understanding by each subsector of the needs of each. In reality, therefore, the CNLA has only 10 members, which is the 10 provincial associations. But we, of course, have access to their members so that we're able to address their needs at the national level. In total, the CNLA represents approximately 4,000 company members. Many of those companies are multifaceted, and so it is difficult to know exactly the number of growers, but we can say with confidence that, conservatively speaking, there are at least 500 nursery growers represented within the membership. And more importantly, that CNLA represents at least 85% of our annual farm gate production value of the sector. As I noted previously, it is the role of CNLA to represent the needs of the sector on national concerns. These are the primary issues that take up much of our resources, and they include plant health and regulatory matters, labor issues, access to business risk management programs, environmental concerns, and access to research funding and programs. In terms of political action and government relations, a few years ago, the nursery sector felt that it was important to bring even greater numbers to Ottawa. And so we have aligned ourselves with the ornamental greenhouse sector and the Quebec Industry Association under the single umbrella of the Canadian Ornamental Horticulture Alliance, or COHA. Although this is a relatively new organization, with combined sector sales of over $3 billion, we now have the clout we need to make the politicians sit up and take notice of our sector and our very specific needs. So now on to some of the facts and figures, I'm missing something here, of the nursery stock sector. The numbers presented in the following few slides are prepared on our behalf by the federal government. Unfortunately, the service is shrinking every year, and the number of reports we receive is declining. So this is a look at our annual sales from the year 2007 to 2012. You'll see that the wholesale nursery sector has enjoyed some good years and some good increases in the sales period from 2007 to 2010, but the last 2 years have seen a decline. We do not need to be an economist to understand the reasons for the decline. A very strong Canadian dollar has resulted in decreased sales to the U.S., and at the same time, a languishing U.S. economy and overproduction has resulted in increased exports from that country. The year 2013 is far from over, but I suspect that we'll see that trend continue for this year as well. My slide presentation isn't working properly here. There was supposed to be a map here to show sales by province. To bring some context to the earlier slides on Canadian demographics, the slide shows that our distribution of sales is pretty much matches our population demographics. And some quick numbers here to highlight a few additional facts and figures of Canada's nursery sector. An important part of analyzing the industry's overall farm gate sales is a closer look at the sales by distribution method. I found it particularly interesting to note that the sales by method more or less trend along the same lines as total sales, with the exception being direct-to-public sales. I'm not really sure what that trend says about our industry. If one looks at our export sales, on a numbers-only basis, the decline is not particularly relevant. But if you look at them in terms of percentage decline, you can see that export sales in 2012 is only 50% of the total value of our export of each of the 3 years of 2008 to 2010. And almost virtually all of our exports go to the United States, with a very small number going to other markets. I've included here also operating expense figures that are supplied to us. These are available for you to look at later if you have further questions. So just a quick look at Canada as an industry overall. The number one characteristic of the nursery sector in Canada is the diversity of the industry. We have ultra-small growers, ultra-large growers, and everything in between. While there is a bit of trend towards specialization, on the whole, Canadian nursery growers tend to be very diverse. Has been a large and growing trend to pot production. The upfront costs are significant, but they must be worthwhile if the rate of conversion to this production method is any indication. And we certainly couldn't talk about Canadian production with at least mentioning our winters. It certainly would be a very different experience than here in Sicily. Certainly temperatures and average rates of snow vary significantly from province to province, but in all provinces, with some exceptions in British Columbia, growers must contend with a large chore and even larger costs associated with winter protection. Depending on location, crops, and grower preference, covered poly houses or laying down crops to cover with microfoam or other materials are the two most common methods of overwintering plants. One of the more important industry initiatives undertaken by the Canadian Nursery Landscape Association in recent years has been the development of a domestic phytosanitary certification system known as the Clean Plants Program. This is a systems-based approach, so very similar to an ISO type of program. A new organization known as the Canadian Nursery Certification Institute was developed to provide third-party audits and to grant certification status. Industry has good input from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency in their development of this program, but it is not within the mandate of CFIA to monitor or provide oversight on domestic programs such as Clean Plants. So this is strictly an industry-led initiative. I'm not too sure what's happened to my slide here, but so these are the top 10 challenges that are facing the growing sector in Canada. That's better. Pressure of pricing. As you can see, our sales are down, and the question is always, are decreasing sales a result of fewer units being sold or lower prices, or a combination of both? Most growers, I think, if you ask them, would tell you that it was a combination of both. There's increased competition within the Canadian marketplace. Fewer exports to the U.S. mean the same volumes need to be sold within Canada. And our at-par value of the Canadian dollar means more imports to Canada from U.S. nurseries. Increased input costs. Growers generally have no control over their major input costs, such as energy, fertilizer, and labor. And it's difficult to pass these costs along to consumers in times of economic slowdown. Crop protection products. Access to crop protection products continues to decline. And although this is an issue faced by growers around the world, there continues to be a disparity from country to country. Products that are not accessible by Canadian growers, but plants grown with these products are available to Canadian consumers, and this has just been a major source of irritation to growers in all sectors for many years. Access to water, access and Quality issues for water are a major issue for growers. Cost of water can vary greatly from operation to operation and from year to year. And the primary concerns are regulatory issues and costs. There is increased red tape for water taking permits and increased regulations to control runoff. And of course, nursery growers continue to be seen as inefficient users of water as they continue to use overhead irrigation as their primary distribution method. Labor is an issue, although access to unskilled labor is not seen as an important issue in Canada because our needs are well met through the offshore worker program that is closely monitored by our government. The real issue comes with access to skilled labor as an ongoing issue. Finding and retaining skilled workers is always a problem, and there is competition from many other industry sectors. The cost of labor in Canada is very high compared to most other countries. This is something that we've heard a lot about today. Plant health and regulatory impacts is always an issue. It's a constantly changing playing field for growers as regulations continue to change on an ongoing basis. Increase in trade means more invasive alien species, threats of more regulations and quarantine actions. And then there's actions by our trading partners, especially the United States, on new regulations such as the new NAPA regulation, which is not authorized pending pest risk assessment. This is something that is going to be a major concern for Canadian growers in the years to come. Environmental issues are a concern. Our products can be part of the solution, but we're also seen as having a very high carbon footprint. And industry, the landscape and the nursery sector always have huge challenges positioning themselves as a true green industry. And environmental concerns result in new regulations and increased oversight to ensure compliance. Bureaucratic impacts. Government plays an increasing role in our businesses, and the interference is from all levels of government. The main irritation for growers is to understand whose regulations take precedence. Is it the federal government, the provincial government, or municipal regulations that take precedence, for instance, in water issues? Transportation is an issue, access and cost of transportation. So there's often lack of availability of trucks, costs. It's always difficult to pass along fuel surcharges to the consumer. And then there is the usual irritants such as border crossing issues, long lineups at the border, paperwork and security issues. Changing demographics is something else that we've heard about today. Nursery growers have enjoyed the benefits of a surge in gardening brought to them by the baby boomers, but they're really unsure as to how to deal with the aging of that demographic. Although baby boomers are still very much in charge on running the show, we feel that they are unclear about how to motivate subsequent generations. So just a few few more things about the Canadian industry, more on the good news side. We have renewed access in Canada to the research and development funding and projects. The nursery and floriculture sectors have gained increased access to funding as a result of our political action through the Canadian Ornamental Horticulture Alliance. Recently, the Canadian Nursery Landscape Association took over the ornamental plant breeding program from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. And so we're retaining and increasing a heritage hardy rose breeding program. And we have developed a unique partnership between the Canadian Nursery Landscape Association and Vineland Research and Innovation Centre to help us to implement new research projects for the industry. And so this is just a quick look at some of the aspects of the rose breeding program. We have been involved in some export market development through presence at IPM. And although we have gained good interest in our product and especially in our genetics through our presence at the IPM show. And just a last slide on Canada on the world stage at AIPH. We recently became, or participated in the AIPH Grower of the Year Awards, and 2 Canadian nurseries, Byland Nursery in Kelowna, BC, and Sheridan Nurseries came home with the Gold Rose Awards in 2011 and 2012 consecutively. And the current president of AIPH is a Canadian, Vic Cron of Lakeshore Landscapes out in Saskatchewan. And we're proud to be hosting the AIPH meetings and conference this coming September in the Niagara Falls area. And that's it. Thank you.
Grazie. Comunico a tutti gli ospiti e relatori che Robert Prince della Nursery and Garden Industry Australian, che non ha potuto essere qui oggi con noi, ha inviato una relazione che sarà inserita negli atti del convegno. L'ultimo intervento programmato questa mattina prima della pausa è quello di Gerdy Olivier, CEO della South African Nursery Association. Prego.
Good day, everybody. Thank you very much for this opportunity to tell you more about our local industry in South Africa, as well as our association. We are the southernmost country in Africa and the economic hub of that region. We have numerous challenges, but I'll explain to you a bit better. We've also got a unique perspective on how we deal with our numerous challenges. Our association is made up of growers, bedding plant growers. Ooh, the slides are. No, it's too big. It's too big. Okay, this presentation isn't perfect, so I'm just going to give it through to you guys. Our association is made up of growers, which consist of bedding plant growers, ornamental growers, indoor plant growers, and rose growers. Then we also have garden centres and hard goods suppliers within our association. We have around 300 principal members, of which just under 100 is actual growers. We have growers grow a huge variety of plants, not just 1 or 2 limited product lines. Our membership benefits are, first of all, representation at government level, communication, which is to us a very, very important thing in our association, education and training, events that we organise, and consumer marketing. I'll touch on a few of these just a bit later. Communication is one of the most important services we can give. This is done through newsletters, special email notifications, our website, and very active Facebook page. Important issues, things that's relevant within our industry, we communicate to members, as we feel that if you know what's going on, we can all work together to make it better. We believe strongly in sharing of knowledge. Our growers have their own individual meetings done at each nursery, where they would walk around, have a tour, ask questions, and share information freely of how they do their production, as well as a formal meeting afterwards. We also arrange various events for our members just to create network opportunities and give them more access to their clients and suppliers. This is done through our conventions, golf days, and very importantly, our trade fairs. We have 2 shows per annum, one in March, which is in our autumn season, and one in August, which is our peak trading season. These shows have grown to become the biggest trade fairs within the Southern Hemisphere, and we have around 130 people exhibiting, over 1,300 visitors, and about 5,000 square meters of exhibition space. And this is ever growing, so we're trying to increase the space as we go along. We also host 2 smaller satellite fairs in our coastal regions to help and assist them. Our major challenges are firstly biodiversity, economical and environmental factors, infrastructure, and staff. South Africa was one of the first countries to sign the Kyoto Agreement, and there's been many, many years of negotiations. I've been involved for 10 years now, and we actually have a good relationship with government. If we did not negotiate, a lot of our plants, some indigenous and some even endemic, would have been prohibited to be grown. This would have been a negative impact on our industry. We've got threatened and protected species that's strongly regulated. The in and export of plants are strongly regulated. And introducing of new varieties is actually quite difficult because government is so strict on us bringing any plants in. You have to do risk assessments, there has to be quarantine periods, and that's really a negative impact on the industry as a whole. This matter is so important that we actually have a seat on our Executive Council for Natural Resources, and we have that looked after. Everybody can list economy as a difficult factor. Operating costs are ever increasing: soil, pots, fertilizer, staff, maintenance, everything. You just can go on and on. For us in South Africa, electricity is a major factor. Over the last few years, per annum, electricity has increased by 25%, and this is seen to be an ongoing process that we need to live with. The supply of electricity is also a huge problem, and it interrupts operations like pumping of water, heating, cooling if you need to, and it's a big concern in our country. Our weather conditions, sometimes hot, sometimes cold, so we need to heat and cool certain of our plants. Water, South Africa is a water-scarce country, and we need to work very conservatively. Water supply is very closely regulated, boreholes has to be registered, and all the water supplies are checked regularly. We are divided into different rainfall areas. Some regions receive ample rainfall, some are quite arid and almost semi-desert. Water restrictions, that happens quite often, which has got a negative impact as government sees us as using the most water, so we get regulated the strictest. We're also in negotiations with local municipalities to see if we can't get our industry to at least get a better reputation when it comes to this. As a rule, our growers are actually very conservative, very responsible when they try to use their water. Acid mine water drainage is a regional problem, especially in Gauteng, where the acid mine water drainage is causing problems with our water supply and water table. Many of our growers are owner-run and quite small, so they don't have unlimited cash resources. To counteract this problem, quite a few has come together and started with brands like Proven Winners, where they have joint marketing and promotion, and that's proved to be very effective when you're a smaller grower. Finding new markets. The South African market is very small, and it's only a local market. There's no real exports. We don't even export to African countries, really. It's difficult. We can't compete with the European market. It's just too costly with logistical. So our markets are quite small, and when one nursery expands into a different region, it creates direct competition for growers already there. So that's something they have to work around. It's a huge opportunity because it grows our industry as a whole, but it also poses a threat. Gardening is also competing with other leisure activities. People tend to do less gardening, houses and yards are getting smaller, people rather do hard landscaping with pebbles, a pot and one plant, instead of doing huge gardens, as it was previously said, the Y generation. This has caused the market to shrink, and we need to find new markets. We need to maybe educate the consumer to rather buy more plants. Demographics in South Africa has also changed over the past few decades. This has had an impact on the type of products that get sold. The biggest part of our country is power is not first world, and priorities are different, so gardening is not very important. But it's through these challenges that the growers have actually come up with a consumer marketing initiative that we call Life as a Garden, and I'll talk about that just a bit now. Infrastructure is another concern. Property development is very costly. Facilities need constant maintenance and upgrading. Transport, some of our growers have to transport their plants about 1,000 miles. It's huge impact, cost in fuel, cost in toll fees that goes up to €50 per trip. Also the quality of product and the time you have to deliver to have a fresh product has got a huge impact. South Africa has a peak season of about 10 weeks in August to middle October, and some nurseries actually do half of their annual turnover in this short period. So they have to look at the demand of plants and make sure that their transport structure fits in with this. Staff is another concern. Our industry is very labor intensive, and on average you would have around 40 staff members in a nursery of plus minus 8 hectares. We don't have any mechanization, so everything is done by hand. This year, government has raised our minimum wage increases by 50%, and it's had a huge impact on our industry. Quite a few members had to cut down on staff, but with our economy being what it is, and an unemployment already at 25%, you don't really want to contribute to making the situation worse. Some people have looked at mechanization, but that's also very costly for short term, and if you don't have the capital outset, that's something you can't really look at this stage. Staff work experience qualification is something that we're busy doing. It's in negotiation with government. We've got a lot of unskilled staff that has actually qualified within their little area of expertise, but they don't have formal paperwork. So we've gone and we've created syllabuses, and they can actually get a qualification for what they're doing. This helps them with job motivation and also getting recognized for what they really do. Now, as I've said earlier, the growers have initiated a marketing campaign to help make consumers aware of gardening as leisure activity. This is Life as a Garden. It's been in its 5th year now, and it's actually going quite strong. Sorry, I can't show you the slides now. We've got 3 components. It's online media, which is the website, YouTube, Twitter. There's a newsletter that we do, and we've recently created YouTube Clip. We've got a whole YouTube channel that we want to get into, just to get the young consumers up to scratch with it. And then we've got marketing for kids grow activities that we do, just to get the kids involved, get the parents to go into nurseries. And this is followed up with print media through magazines, newspapers, and our membership board that is done through posters and point of sale to retail members to tie in the whole program. And this program is going to be ongoing to see if we can make people aware of gardening and let them do it again. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Grazie, come ho detto era l'ultimo intervento della mattina, adesso c'è la pausa pranzo, circa un'ora, alle 14 ci ritroviamo qui, vi prego la puntualità perché anche nel pomeriggio c'è un serrato ciclo di interventi prima delle conclusioni. Grazie, a dopo.
Number